Now, with all the madness that's been going on in FPL in recent game weeks, I think quite a few managers are going to be looking to hit the wildcard button in game week 30. And if you are, I've got a draft for you. Right then, so in order to make the best wildcard draft for Game Week 30, you've got to do so knowing about the potential upcoming double and potentially blank game weeks that we have coming up, right? So looking at this fixture grid, which is courtesy of Ben Krellin on Twitter, thank you, Ben, for all of the excellent fixture work that you do. I am expecting some of these double game weeks to be confirmed before the Game Week 30 deadline, so I'm going a little bit early with this video, but I thought it'd be useful to get it out before the international break, just to get those creative cogs whirring, if you like, for your wildcard drafts. But Ben has put together a really good fixture spreadsheet here, which predicts the likelihood of double game weeks happening in 34, 35, 36, and 37, right? So looking in double game week 34, it's likely that Arsenal, Bournemouth, Crystal Palace, Everton, Liverpool, Sheffield United, and Wolves will have a double. In 35, it's likely that both Brighton and Chelsea will double. In 37, we could see a potential double game week for Brighton, and then a very likely double game week for Chelsea, Man City, Man United, Newcastle, and Tottenham. So with all of that information in mind, I think it's really worth setting your team up to attack the double in 34, and then using your free transfers in subsequent game weeks to maybe hop off some of the players that double in 34 but don't in 37 to ones that do. But yeah, I think with a wild card in game week 30, you're probably best setting yourself up to attack the double in 34. And with that in mind, I've put together a team that I'm hoping does exactly that. So in defence and in goal, I've got Dubravka and Raya as the rotating keepers. Right now, I think it's worth just starting Dubravka against Newcastle instead of Raya against Man City. If you really wanted to, though, I think you could obviously start Raya against Man City. I just don't think they're likely to keep a clean sheet. Udogie, Gabriel and Gusto in defence. I really like Udogie as a defensive asset. Tottenham, they don't keep a huge amount of clean sheets, but going forward, the Tottenham fullbacks sometimes take up more advanced positions than Heung-min Son does at centre forward. So Udogie being quite a bit cheaper than Porro, there isn't a whole lot to split them in terms of attacking returns this season. So for that reason, I think I'd favour Udogie. Gabriel is in there. I think he's probably the best defender in FPL right now. He's got so much goal threat from set pieces, and Arsenal, they're the top scoring team in the league from set pieces. Even against Man City, I wouldn't be too worried about starting him. Like I said, I don't expect Arsenal to keep a clean sheet, but his danger from set pieces is just too big, where I honestly think you could start him every week. Then after that, he's got Luton and Brighton. I wouldn't rule out an Arsenal clean sheet in either of those games. I've gone for Gusto from Chelsea. I just think Reece James's injury record is so poor that Gusto is probably the first choice right back at Chelsea now. Burnley in game week 30 is their fixture. I think it's great. Likely to get, well, could get an attacking return, and obviously a decent chance for clean sheet. Then he's got Man United, where you could obviously bench him for one of these other guys I've gone for. And then Sheffield United in game week 32. So really decent set of fixtures and a nice rotation amongst some of these other defenders. Two benchers I've gone for. Aït-Nouri, who I'll talk about in a second. And Richards, who I think is my pick of the dirt cheap defenders in the game. He's got Nottingham Forest and Bournemouth in his next two. I wouldn't be worried about him coming off my bench in those two games. He's looking decent and nailed on for Crystal Palace now, who I'd suggest they're obviously floating around the relegation zone. But under a new manager, I think they could change a little bit. Hopefully keep some clean sheets over that period. I definitely think he's better than Charlie Taylor anyway at that price. So Aït-Nouri then, when you look at those season-long stats, sorry about the formatting of the two there, 3 clean sheets, 1 goal, 2 assists from 21 starts in the league. It's not amazing, right? But Wolves have a really nice set of fixtures coming up, and when we saw the fixtures, he's likely to double in game week 34 as well. And when you look at the opportunities, you might have to start him if you just go back. You might want to start him in game week 31 when he's got Burnley, and then he plays West Ham and Nottingham Forest, and then he's got a double game week. So yes, game week 30 is not the best fixture, but you can bench him for that and then play him for the subsequent games. And he's got 4 attacking returns in his last 5 games in all competitions. So he is in a really good run of form at the moment. And I think it's, given the way the fixtures are laid out with obviously the double in 34, it's probably worth picking a Wolves defender. And Aït-Nouri looks to be nailed on for Wolves now, and I think is their most attacking defender, which suggests to me that he's the best defender to go for in FPL. I don't have a whole lot more to say, really. I think yeah, looking at the fixtures, it's probably worth picking a Wolves defender. You don't have to start him in Game Week 30. And of the selection of Wolves defenders available, I think he's probably the best. Midfield then, Saka. And you might be surprised to see Foden in there. Salah and Cole Palmer. I think you've got to go for Mo Salah, really. I think he's the best captain in Game Week 30. The draft hound, as you can see there, the draft hound expected points haven't quite updated to suggest that Salah is fully fit to play 90 against Brighton yet. Obviously, I think that's going to be the case. We saw that against Man United in the FA Cup, and obviously he scored in that game as well. I think he's by far and away the best captain for Game Week 30, with Cole Palmer probably being a close second. I mean, Cole Palmer is just a shoo-in for your team, right? He's a fantastic midfielder, genuinely one of the best midfielders in FPL, and he's still priced at under 6 million. So for me, you know, regardless of whether Chelsea have doubles or blanks or whatever, he's a shoo-in for your FPL team. I've gone for Foden over Son purely because I'm building this team with a team value of 100 million, and I'll show you later on what you could build if you potentially had a bit more cash in the bank. But I can't quite stretch to Son with this team, and for that reason, I still think Phil Foden is perfectly decent to go up against Son. He's 2 million cheaper than him now. And I think a lot of managers are going to be put off by Phil Foden just because of the Arsenal fixture in Game Week 30. Ultimately, though, he's been so good for Man City this season. I wouldn't rule out an attacking return against Arsenal, right? And even if you do, you know, potentially Sarabia could come off your bench, who I think is going to be a decent option for Wolves, given the injuries they've got in their forward line. The fact he's probably their penalty taker, and he's only 4.7 million, so you could potentially start him against Villa, who are definitely not the best team in the league defensively at the moment. You could start him instead of Foden if you really wanted to. But ultimately, you know, with Aston Villa and Crystal Palace in 31 and 32, and like I said, I wouldn't rule out an attacking return against Arsenal either. I still think Foden's a great option. And likewise, Saka, right? Again, don't want to be put off by one fixture in Game Week 30 being tough, because I think Arsenal have the ability to score multiple goals in any game, and Saka is definitely their talisman in best player, right? So yeah, those four midfielders for me, if you've got, you know, a limited amount of team value, I think are the four to go for, with Sarabia on your bench, who of course has a double game week in 34 as well. So you'd probably want to start him for that game week if he's still in the Wolves team, taking their penalties, etc., and playing well. I think he's a really nice option to have on your bench, and then a potential option to start in Game Week 34 as well. Yeah, just a bit more info on Mo Salah, really. To be honest, and this is one of the key things I wanted to talk about here, the reason I'm really eyeing up playing my wildcard in Game Week 30 is because I can't easily get to Mo Salah in my team. And when you look at the next couple of game weeks, right? So Game Week 30, there are a few potential captain options. You got Chelsea against Burnley, who obviously leaves Cole Palmer as a potential captaincy option. Spurs against Luton, obviously Son is a good option there. And then Liverpool play Brighton in Game Week 30, right? With Man City playing Arsenal, I think you can kind of rule out Haaland as a top captaincy option. I definitely think he's worth picking, but he's probably not the best captain. So it probably suggests, in my opinion, that Salah is the best captain in Game Week 30, obviously with respect to Son and Palmer being perfectly decent options alongside, right? And then in Game Week 31, Salah plays Sheffield United at home, and Arsenal, Man City have got Villa, Arsenal have got Luton, so potential captaincy options there. But when you look at the outstanding captain in Game Week 31, you've got to say Salah v Sheffield United is that man. So over the next couple of game weeks, Salah is by far and away, in my opinion, the best captain. So he's got to be in your team, in my opinion, particularly if you're on your wild card. And for me, I would basically have to tear up my current FPL team to get him in. I think I'm looking at a -8 in order to successfully get him into my team. And I'd rather just wildcard and have a full team that I'm really happy with. You know, the guy's back fit, good to start for Liverpool, playing 90 minutes. I mean, we all know he's basically the best player in FPL history, right? And the best captain over the next couple of game weeks. So he's an absolute shoo-in for your wildcard draft. And I'd suggest if you can't get to him easily, it's probably one of the main reasons you should hit the wildcard button in the first place. Right then, on to the forwards. I've got Muniz, Haaland and Darwin Núñez up front. Like I said, I think if you're on a bit of limited team value, this is the best three to go with. Muniz, at 4.6 million, is performing at the moment like a premium option, like a premium striker, right? He's got Sheffield United and Nottingham Forest, and then Newcastle in his next three fixtures. Sheffield United being pretty much the worst team in the league. Nottingham Forest not looking much better. And then Newcastle, I still think statistically, even though I've started Dubravka, they're the worst team in the league for expected goals conceded. So with the form that he's been in for Fulham, I think it's really tough to avoid him. You know, 4.6 million for the form that he's in the fixtures he's got. I think he's a really nice option, and obviously rotates quite nicely, in my opinion, with Sarabia. You know, if you don't fancy Muniz in a particular fixture, I think Sarabia is a decent option to go for to rotate. And then Haaland and Darwin Núñez. Watkins is probably my second favourite striker in the game, but I don't think I can justify picking him on a wildcard anymore because, well, he's 9 million, and Darwin Núñez for 1.5 million less, I think, is in almost as good a set of form, and he's got a double in Game Week 34, right? And I also think with how Cody Gakpo is playing at the moment, he's definitely not first choice for Liverpool. I definitely think he's their 4th best forward. And, you know, Jota's injured. So I think Darwin's got a pretty clear run in this Liverpool team. And in previous game weeks, I was doubtful of picking him just because of his minutes not being guaranteed. But now they're not. I think they're pretty much nailed on. You know, he's nailed on to start in a really good option. And then you've got to go for Erling Haaland, right? Yes, he's probably not the best captain over the next couple of game weeks, but he's of like Salah. He's one of the best players in the game, right? I don't think there's any reason not to pick him. And then come, Game Week 32, he's the best captain against Crystal Palace when Salah has Man United. So, yeah, that's the team. Hopefully you like it. I'll talk a bit more about the pricing, etc. next. So, yeah, what I thought I'd do with the end of this video is just suggest another team depending on your team value, right? The reason I'm doing that, I think if you're watching FPL YouTube videos at the point of time of Game Week 30, you're probably a fairly engaged manager and probably have more than 100 million of team value. And if you do, I put together a second draft, basically based on my team, with 104.7 million of team value, which might be more in the ballpark of what you can afford. You might not necessarily be able to stretch to quite this team, or you might actually be able to improve upon it if you've done a little bit better than me with conserving and protecting your team value. Likes of getting Cole Palmer, Son, Saka, Watkins, etc. early. I think you could build a team quite similar to this. In this one, you can fit all the good players in, I think, for the game weeks in mind. So Raya in goal, I've start him over Dubravka, switch them around however you want to play it. Udogie, Gusto, Gabriel, those three remain the same. I think for Game Week 30 at least, those three are the best defenders to go for. And then in midfield, I've got Palmer, Saka, Son. You can fit all 4 of those in. I think Son definitely over the next 3 or 4 game weeks is a better option than Foden, but he is 2 million more expensive, right? Which is why I went for Foden in the previous draft. I don't really need to wax any lyrical about Son, right? He's a fantastic option. I mean, yeah, don't need to say any more about him. On penalties, which obviously Foden isn't, and his minutes are probably a little bit more guaranteed. Then you can go Haaland, Darwin, and then Solanke up front as well. I think Solanke, with the fact he's likely to double in Game Week 34, I think the double, if we just go back to the fixtures, the double is going to be Aston Villa and Bournemouth, which I think is a really nice double game week. Well, there we go. Solanke, yeah, I think he's a great option. And one point I wanted to make about Solanke as well is his form has kind of dipped in line with the injury that he picked up. But given it's the international break now and he's not been selected for England, he's basically got a couple of weeks to rest up that injury and get back into form. And he's got Everton, Crystal Palace and Luton as his 3 fixtures up after that. And then a likely double game week in 34 versus Wolves and Aston Villa, which I think is a really nice double game week. And when you look at those expected points from Drafttown as well, I take 5 points a game week from him. Yeah, I really like him as an option. Given, yeah, that he's got 2 weeks to rest over the international break, I think that could be good time to repair his knee injury and get him right back to that form again. With my team value, I have to really scrimp on the midfielders and defenders I've got on my bench, but ultimately, they're the bench options, so I'm not too worried about scrimping on them. I'd be happy to start, most of my 11 against pretty much any opposition. Dubravka in goal, who I've got a little bit more value invested in. I bought him for 4 million, so I'm happy to keep him for that. Branthwaite, 4.2 million. I think Everton, particularly, I think they're likely to double in 34 as well. They're not too bad defensively, and I do think he offers a little bit of goal threat from set pieces. And he's got Bournemouth, Newcastle and Burnley. You might want to start him in Game Week 32 when he plays Burnley. But for the rest of the game weeks, I don't think you need to start him compared to the other defenders in the team. Richards, who, like I said, is my pick of the 3.9s, and Sarabia from Wolves in the midfield. If you want to rotate him with any of these players, any game week, you could. And likewise, he's got a double in 34 as well. So yeah, if you've got a little bit more value invested in your team, you could build something that looks like this. Just thought I'd cover all the bases with these 2 drafts. All right, and that's the end of the video. I hope that gave you a bit of information there around the fixtures and potential options to go for if you're on your wildcard. And like I said, I tried to, cope with every sort of budget sort of position players will be in. I've got a bargain basement wildcard team first, and then another one if you've got a bit more cash in the bank. So if you enjoyed the video and found it helpful, I'd really appreciate it if you could leave me a like rating. You can subscribe to the Golden Goal channel just here if you want to see more content from me. And I will catch you in my next video. Thanks so much for watching.